What are the most expensive transfers in Premier League history? Well, that's an easy question to answer, you might think. Less so, however, if all the deals done during the competition's history were adjusted for inflation and compared with one another within an even context. Now, that wouldn't be Bank of England inflation because that equates to roughly 2.8% each year, but rather football inflation. A figure that better reflects the explosion in the game's finances over the past 30 years and the exponential growth in transfer fees. And that is exactly what The Athletic has created. With help from Kieran Maguire and Jason Laws of the University of Liverpool, who developed a formula which translates historic transfer fees into more contemporary figures. So, let's look at the results. At the time of recording, the current Premier League transfer record for an incoming player is the £100 million that Manchester City spent on Jack Grealish. Interestingly though, that's good enough only for 17th place on our adjusted list. Romelu Lukaku, who joined Chelsea for £97.5 million in the summer of 2021, also sits in 19th position. But Paul Pogba, signed by Manchester United for £94.5 million in 2016, would have commanded a £126 million fee today and be the 5th most expensive deal in the competition's history. Now, before filling out the rest of the list, here are some interesting snippets. Kepa Arrizabalaga is still the most expensive goalkeeper on the list, but few would guess that the £3.42 million Blackburn spent on Southampton goalkeeper Tim Flowers in November 1993 would put him in second place, 67th overall, and equate to £62.8 million today. Liverpool misfit El Hadji Diouf's transfer from Lens in 2002 would be worth £45.2 million today. Martin Keown probably wouldn't expect to see himself as the 88th most expensive transfer in Premier League history, but the £2.7 million that Arsenal paid Everton would be a staggering £50.3 million today. And while centre-forward Joe was a much maligned £21.6 million signing by Manchester City in the summer of 2008, history would be less kind if today's market prices were applied, and City had paid CSKA Moscow £51.7 million for those 6 goals in all competitions. Now, talking of City signings, their infamous deal for Robinho 2 months later would actually cost £88.5 million today, making him the club's most expensive signing and the 30th on the Premier League list. And across town, in 2022, Manchester United would actually have spent £99.4 million to sign Jaap Stam and £105 million to buy Ruud van Nistelrooy, both from PSV Eindhoven, plus another £109.5 million to snatch Andy Cole from Newcastle United. Middlesbrough also feature in the form of that stunning 1997 deal for Fabrizio Ravanelli, which would have cost them £103.6 million today, but only £8.8 million in July 96. Blackburn are there too. The signing of Chris Sutton from Norwich, one of the cornerstones of their title win in 95, would run to £101 million. That would have left Jack Walker digging very deep into his pockets and was considerably more than the inflated £70.3 million that it would later take to sign Kevin Davies from Southampton. And according to the Athletic's formula, that's exactly the same fee that Chelsea paid Lille for Eden Hazard. Elsewhere, Rio Ferdinand had the distinction of being the most expensive player signed by Newcastle United and Tottenham, and Nicky Barmby also makes the list. His move to Everton from Middlesbrough would now be worth £85.1 million, rather than the £7.2 million it was in October 96. But none of these deals would crack the top 10. Nor would Chelsea's signing of Andrei Shevchenko from AC Milan, which would be expensive only enough for 11th place. Fernando Torres does make it, so does Dennis Bergkamp. By modern standards, the £10 million that Arsenal spent was a bargain given his transformative effect, but 1995's £10 million is actually 117.3 according to the Athletic's calculator. Good enough to make Bergkamp the 9th most expensive Premier League player of all time. 8th is Dwight York, and the move that made John Gregory want to shoot him. Maybe less so if Aston Villa had received £118.2 million instead of 17.3. 7th is another Manchester United signing, Wayne Rooney's move from Everton. 6th is Rio Ferdinand's move from West Ham to Leeds. Even free-spending Peter Ridsdale probably wouldn't have sanctioned £124.9 million. 5th is Pogba, and we'd know about him. 4th is Rio Ferdinand again, who left Leeds 18 months after arriving and would have cost Man United £132.5 million had he joined 20 years later. 3rd and 2nd place is taken by a pair of regrets. A few highlights aside, Liverpool's signing of Stan Collymore was a disappointment. But more so had it been concluded for £132.9 million. And while Sir Alex Ferguson defended him to the hilt, and he was no doubt a very talented player, United's £155.4 million for Juan Sebastian Veron does look a bit steep. At the top of the list, though, is a deal which broke the world record for a transfer paid at the time, and which the Athletic's inflation formula describes as being even more dramatic now than it was then. It's the £15 million that Newcastle spent on Blackburn's Alan Shearer, the equivalent of an enormous £222 million today. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Daniel Taylor, Ollie Kay, Amy Lawrence and Rafa Honigstein. There are journalists dedicated to each Premier League team, so every fan gets the coverage they deserve, not just the big clubs. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.